They say the Great Sphinx of Giza has no voice, but I was there when its eyes first opened. I saw chisels bite into the living rock. I watched kings dream in its shadow, and I stood when storms tried to bury it. I have walked beneath its gaze for centuries, and I know the secrets carved deeper than stone. Let me tell you what the Sphinx remembers. I arrived at dawn, when the eastern sky had the color of ground ochre and the desert exhaled its night-cool breath. The stone cat watched me, half lion, half king, its gaze nailed to the line where the sun would soon strike. People say you cannot feel a statue look at you. People are wrong. I call myself Menk, though the names men give me change the way dunes change shape. I have tended sand, water, and rumor on this plateau longer than any living register remembers. My first memory is the thud of dolerite pounding stones on bedrock, and the chant of gangs of workmen cutting a trench around the ridge that would become the Sphinx. I was a water runner then, barefoot, tending to the men who hunted the bedrock as if it were a living beast. We carved down, not up. The lion's body was not stacked from blocks. It was freed from the hill, its spine still welded to the earth. The head, raised higher into stronger limestone, was sculpted with a delicacy we rarely got credit for. You can see it in the curve of the lips and the softened angle of the jaw. Toward the back, where the bedrock turned chalky, we had to sheath the lion's flanks with masonry, neat courses of limestone. Each block inked in mason's marks that only the sun and I can still read. The morning I first saw the face, it was still a raw mask, with shallow eyes and an overlarge headcloth ribbing. A master carver on a scaffold shouted down for water. "Pour it over the stone, boy. Make the dust show the lines." When I lifted the jar, the rock drank like a god, and the face emerged. A young man's mouth, almost smiling, and that impossible calm that kings practice in bronze mirrors. We built a temple from the bones we tore from the lion's trench. That's another thing most forget. The Sphinx birthed its own temple. Blocks marched from the enclosure's walls, squared and set beside the paws into hulking piers. Megaliths that still make modern men step back. The alignment came from a reed sight, a cord with knots, and a stubborn insistence that sunrise should arrive exactly where we expected it to. "So the lion will drink the sun," the master said. Every day, the same sip. The day the uraeus, our cobra, was set on the brow, I was close enough to see the chisels flash. Years later, it would vanish. Myth says Napoleon's soldiers shot it away. Truth is, I had already lost the snake long before. Wind and zealotry are both sharpshooters. A man with a hammer can be as precise as a musket if his faith is hot. We left the lion half-buried because that is what sand does. It takes back what we claim. I uncovered those paws 3 times in my life, and each time different men took the credit. The first great uncovering came when the boy prince who napped in the shadow of the chin became a king. Thutmose, he called himself, and he dreamed. He said the gods spoke through granite. "Clear my throat, little falcon, and I will clear your path." We dug, hauled sand like ants, and stood back while he set a stele between the paws, a slab of red granite with the sun's name on it, Arehoricti, so that anyone arriving thereafter would know Dawn lived here. My hands still remember the texture of that stele, slick where priests and pilgrims rubbed their palms against its face. They came in caravans, Nubian soldiers, priests from the Delta, women with coal-lined eyes tying strings around the lion's toe for luck. Some scratched their names into the legs. Greek sailors carved letters like ladders. Later, Coptic hands left crosses. The lion is a guestbook, if you know where to stare. When I say I saw, you will ask how I could have seen. The desert makes its own kind of immortality. Perhaps I was several men. Perhaps stories chained themselves to me until my skin thickened like limestone and I learned to wait without blinking. The lion taught me that there is a trick to the Sphinx's face. Approach from the side, late in the day, when the sun finds every nick in the stone. You will notice the different limestones, the head's fine layers tight as hair, the body's coarse strata wounded. You will see bands of repair stone from ages when kings tried to stitch the creature's skin back together. In some of those repairs, small channels were carved into the body, not decorative but practical, to guide rainwater down the flanks instead of into the trench. Rain in a desert seems like a joke until it isn't. Then a single storm will carry a century of regret. I remember when men first whispered that the lion was older than our oldest king. They pointed to the softened ribs and said water did that, not wind. They insisted ancient rains sculpted those folds in epochs before pharaohs learned to rule. I watched their arguments tangle like kite strings. I smiled, because the head knows when it was cut, and the face knows whose brow it honored. But the body remembers a more ancient climate. There were days when the Nile ran closer, when papyrus shadows brushed the floodplain's edge, and nights when the desert, in love with moonlight, turned silver. During one such night, a caravan of storytellers camped by the chest. They played at riddles as if the Sphinx had posed one. Myth says he killed those who answered wrong. The truth, the only thing the lion kills is pretense. Stand in front of that face and try to lie, your own breath will betray you. The nose. You want to hear about the nose. Myth says cannon fire. Another myth says it vanished in a single tantrum of zeal. I watched the face for centuries. The nose went the way noses go, weather, chips, pry marks, perhaps one furious hammer. But never in a single afternoon. The lion's wounds are slow epics, not headlines. Once, during an unusual winter rain, I found a small fragment under the chin. Striated limestone polished by many hands. It smelled faintly of incense. It might have been beard. Some kings wore false beards. We fixed one to the lion too, a ceremonial tuft that fell away and wandered through museums like a pilgrim who lost the road. When people argue where it belongs, I want to tell them, it belongs to the gesture. Beards come and go. The jaw remains. From the enclosure's floor you can look up and see the lion as a real animal might see the world. Paws enormous, chest an escarpment, tail curling back along the flank like a line on papyrus. That tail amused soldiers. More than one Roman slapped it for luck, then pretended nothing happened when their centurion glared. The Romans had their own names, Harmaches, or simply the Great Image. We dug twice more in my memory, once led by men in wide hats, speaking strange tongues, hauling sand with caravans of baskets, posing for drawings with the paws. Another time, men with buzzing machines measured the lion with light, numbers humming into boxes. They claimed cavities lay under the chest. I laughed, not because they were wrong, but because they had learned our manner. Suspect that even stone keeps a private room. Dawn rituals changed, but dawn itself did what it always does. On mornings near the equinox, the sun rose so straight the lion's gaze seemed to draw it up with a string. Priests said it fused the horizon with the king's breath. Later poets said the lion bit the sun and held it tame for a heartbeat. I have watched modern ceremonies too, high-vis vests instead of linen kilts, laser plumb lines instead of cords. Reverence, quieter, but true. You want little-known things, so I will give you minutiae. A cool patch of rock behind the left ear, where swifts return each year. Thin channels on repair blocks, gutters for rain, not ornament. Under the paws, the ground tastes faintly of copper after rain. Old men of Giza said the lion guards the sunrise with a metal tongue. The enclosure's walls tilt like waves caught in limestone, fossilized ocean at your fingertips. Graffiti covers the beast, lovers' initials, children's games, Greek letters high on the flank where sand once rose. The lion has slept and woken in drifts taller than soldiers. On windless nights, the plateau keeps sound like a jar keeps fragrance. I have heard jackals argue with the moon, camel bells pace constellations, even songs from the river with no boat to account for them. The lion keeps those noises behind his teeth. If he ever opens his mouth, the old songs will pour out like birds. When people try to own the Sphinx with theories, I bring them at dusk to stand between the paws. Look up, I say. The face is scarred, noseless, softened by light. Yet the emotion remains. Not threat, not challenge, witness. He has watched sand lift and settle, dynasties rise and fall, cities glow and go dark. He does not answer riddles. He asks one, what do you intend to last? Once, a young woman with a sketchbook asked if the Sphinx was a man or a mountain. Both, I said. She told me some believe there were once twin sphinxes, the second long gone. Myth, perhaps borrowed from gates guarded in pairs. Yet sometimes, when the wind runs against itself, I feel a second presence, a ghost watcher whose absence tilts the horizon. We painted the lion more than once. You cannot see it now, but there were days when the headcloth gleamed with red ochre, blue from crushed stone, black from soot. The desert bleaches, priests repaint, winds erase, until the recipe is forgotten. I still dream in color even when daylight shows only bone. And here is a secret. Inside the right forepaw, close to the surface, one skin of repair kisses another. Press there lightly, you will feel a tiny give like breath returning pressure. Stone remembers the hand. That's why we touch monuments. Not to take, but to share the weight. I saw men argue the Sphinx is a portrait of Khafre, Khufu, or some forgotten prince. I could draw you instead the carver who steadied the chin, or the mason who stood on a block too tall to reach the ear. Kings are important. Makers are intimate. When you stand there, remember both. By noon, the tourists swarm, and I become only another shadow in the shade. They point, pose, frame the lion between thumb and forefinger. They laugh. Laughter is an offering too. The desert takes whatever you give and stacks it into time. Twice only has the lion frightened me. Once when an earthquake made the blocks groan like teeth. Once when a sandstorm erased the world so fully I thought we had returned to untouched limestone. When the dust fell away, the lion sat unmoved, gaze steady. At sunset I walk the ridge behind the Sphinx, where the plateau meets the sky. The city hums beyond, all light and metal, but here the lion sets the tempo. He will outlast my borrowed names. He will outlast yours. He does not mind our stories. He is thirsty for them. Each equinox I stand between the paws. The sun lifts, crowns the face for one held breath, then withdraws. No steel records it, no priest declares it. That is the riddle and the answer. Stone and intention aligned, briefly, with the sky. Come when you can. Bring your myths. I will trade you mine. Lay your hand where repair meets original skin and feel the lion breathe. The Sphinx will tell you the only little-known fact that matters. That patience is a form of architecture, and watching is a way to build.